My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old, and what I'm about to share with you is one of the most painful and life-changing experiences of my life. For a long time, I kept this part of my life private because I wasn't ready to talk about it. But today, I finally feel ready to tell you what really happened. It had been only 5 days since my wedding when I discovered something about my husband that completely changed the way I saw him. He was sitting right in front of me, speaking French to another woman, thinking I couldn't understand a single word. But he had no idea that I had been speaking French long before I ever met him. What I heard that day wasn't something I could simply forget. It was the beginning of a truth that would uncover secrets I never knew existed. So, before we begin, if you enjoy emotional stories about love, betrayal, hidden truths, and unexpected twists, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Emma Tells All. Now, let me take you back to the day everything changed. 5 days. That's all it took. 5 days after I married the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, I was sitting across from him at our dining table when he picked up his phone and started speaking French to another woman. He didn't whisper. He didn't leave the room. He didn't even look nervous. He simply looked at me, smiled, and continued his conversation as if I couldn't understand a single word. What he didn't know was that I had been speaking French long before I ever met him, and the first thing I heard him say was not something a newly married man should say to another woman. He said, "Tu me manques tellement. I miss you so much. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 28 years old, and until that moment I believed I had married my best friend. I believed Ethan and I were starting the most beautiful chapter of our lives. I believed the little things he did for me meant something. The way he remembered my coffee order, the way he called my mother on her birthday, the way he held my hand when we walked through crowded places, the way he looked at me during our wedding ceremony. I believed all of it. Maybe that's why what happened next hurt so much. Because betrayal doesn't hurt only because of what someone does. It hurts because of everything you believed before you discovered what they were doing. Ethan and I met at a friend's birthday dinner in Boston. I almost didn't go that night. I had worked late, my hair was a mess, and I was exhausted. My friend practically dragged me out of my apartment. "Come on, Claire. You need to get out." So I went. Ethan was sitting at the other end of the table. He wasn't the loudest person there. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just listening. At one point, someone made a joke and everyone laughed except him. I looked at him. He looked at me. And we both started laughing because apparently we were the only two people who hadn't understood the joke. That was our first conversation. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just easy. After dinner, he offered to walk me to my car. We talked for almost an hour. He told me about his work. I told him about my love of languages. When I mentioned French, he smiled. "Do you actually speak it?" I laughed. "Yeah, pretty well." "That's impressive," I shrugged. "My grandmother loved French. I started learning because of her." He nodded. Then the conversation moved on. I didn't know that one little fact about me would become important later. We started dating. The first year was wonderful. Ethan made me feel seen. He sent me good morning texts. He remembered things I mentioned weeks earlier. He never seemed afraid of commitment. After about a year and a half, he proposed. I said yes. Our wedding was beautiful. It wasn't huge. It wasn't some celebrity-style wedding. It was simply ours. Our closest family members, our closest friends. A beautiful ceremony, dinner, music, dancing. My mother cried during the vows. Ethan held my hands and promised he would always be honest with me. I remember that promise very clearly now, because 5 days later, he broke it. After our wedding, we stayed home for a few days. We were supposed to leave for our honeymoon the following week. There were still wedding gifts stacked against one wall. My bouquet was sitting in a glass vase. Our wedding photograph was on the shelf behind Ethan, and I was wearing my wedding ring while eating a piece of leftover wedding cake. It should have been one of the happiest evenings of my life. Then Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something changed in his face. It was quick, barely a second. But I noticed. He stood up. Then he answered. "Bonjour." I froze. French. At first, I thought it was a business call. Ethan had mentioned working with international clients, so I didn't interrupt. Then I heard a woman's voice. I couldn't make out every word, but I understood enough. She asked him how he was. He said he was fine. Then she asked whether he was alone. Ethan looked at me. He smiled. Then he walked toward the kitchen, but he didn't close the door. I could still hear him. He said, "Je suis avec elle." I'm with her. The woman said something. Ethan laughed. Then I heard him say, "Tu me manques tellement. I miss you so much." My stomach dropped. I stared at him. He had absolutely no idea that I understood. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. Then the woman asked him something. Ethan answered, "Je pensais à toi tout le temps." I've been thinking about you all the time. I felt like the room had suddenly become too small. My hands went cold. I looked at my wedding ring. 5 days. We had been married for 5 days. And my husband was telling another woman that he missed her. Then she asked him, "Tu l'aimes vraiment? Do you really love her?" Ethan looked at me, and he answered, "Oui." Yes. For one brief second, relief touched my heart. Then he continued, "But it's complicated." I felt that relief disappear. The woman asked him why. He lowered his voice. I leaned forward without realizing it. Then I heard something that made my heart stop. He said, "Notre mariage était nécessaire." Our marriage was necessary. Necessary, not beautiful, not perfect, not love. Necessary. I don't think anyone can understand what that word feels like until they hear it from the person wearing the same wedding ring as them. I sat there silently. Ethan continued speaking. He told her that things would be different soon. He said he couldn't make any sudden moves. Then the woman asked, "Are you going to leave her?" Ethan answered, "Pas encore." Not yet. I closed my eyes. That was the moment I knew my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. But I still didn't know why. I still didn't know what Ethan was hiding. And I decided not to confront him immediately. That was probably the hardest decision I had ever made, because everything inside me wanted to stand up and scream, but another voice in my head said, "Don't react. Find out the truth." So I waited. Ethan ended the call a few minutes later. He walked back into the dining room. He looked completely normal. "Sorry," he said. "That was work." I looked at him. "Work?" "Yeah." "French?" He laughed. "One of our clients is French." I nodded. "Interesting." He smiled and kissed my forehead. I almost pulled away, but I didn't. I smiled. "Of course." That night I lay beside him in bed. He fell asleep within minutes. I couldn't. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I kept thinking about the words I had heard. Necessary. Not yet. I miss you. I had been married for 5 days. How could there already be another woman? And why French? Why did he think I wouldn't understand? Then I remembered something. Years ago, when I was 19, I had started learning French seriously. My grandmother had spent several years in France. She used to speak French around the house when I was growing up. After she passed away, I started learning because I wanted to understand the language she loved. At first, it was just a hobby. Then I became obsessed with it. I watched French movies. I listened to French podcasts. I practiced with native speakers. I read books. By the time I met Ethan, I could speak French comfortably. He knew I had studied languages, but he didn't know how fluent I was. Early in our relationship, I had once joked that I could understand a little French, but probably couldn't hold a serious conversation. He laughed. I laughed, and I never corrected him. I never imagined that small joke would one day protect me from a lie. The next morning, Ethan kissed me goodbye. "Love you." I looked into his eyes. "Love you too." He left. The moment the door closed, I opened a notebook. I wrote down every French sentence I remembered, every detail, every name, every strange word. At the bottom of the page I wrote, "I will not confront him until I know the whole truth." For the next several days, I watched. I didn't follow him. I didn't invade every part of his life. I simply paid attention. And once I stopped trusting him blindly, I started noticing things I had ignored before. He started taking his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom. He changed his password. He turned the screen away whenever a notification appeared. He stopped leaving his laptop open. He became protective of certain conversations. Then, one evening, I heard French again. This time, Ethan was in the garage. I stood inside the kitchen doorway and listened. It was the same woman, Sophie. I learned her name that night. She asked him why he had married me. Ethan said, "Because my father would have cut me off." I stopped breathing. His father? What did his father have to do with our marriage? Sophie asked another question. Ethan said, "Claire doesn't know about the company." The company? I had never heard about any family company. Ethan had always told me he worked as a project manager for a construction firm, nothing more. Then he said something that made my hands shake. "Once the transfer is complete, I'll be free." I didn't know what transfer he meant, but I knew something was seriously wrong. The next morning I asked him casually, "How's work?" "Busy." "Still working on that new project?" "Yeah." "What kind of project?" He looked at me. For half a second I saw fear in his eyes. Then he smiled. "Nothing interesting." I smiled back. "Okay." But inside, I was asking myself, what exactly was he planning to transfer? I started reviewing our household finances. I had every right to. We were newly married. We were supposed to be building a life together. That's when I discovered something strange. 3 weeks before our wedding, Ethan had opened a new business account. My name was connected to it. I had never opened that account. I had never signed anything. I called the bank. They couldn't give me all the details without additional verification, but they confirmed that documents containing my personal information had been submitted. My name, my address, my date of birth, and what appeared to be my signature. I felt sick. Someone had used my identity, and somehow my husband was involved. I called a lawyer. I explained everything. The lawyer listened carefully. Then he said something that changed the way I handled the entire situation. "Don't confront him yet." "Why?" "Because if your identity is being used for financial purposes, you need documentation before you accuse anyone." I asked how serious it could be. He paused. "Potentially very serious." That night, Ethan came home with flowers. He smiled. "Just because." I took them. "Thank you." He kissed me. I looked into his eyes. For the first time, I wondered whether he had ever loved me, or whether he had simply needed me. The following afternoon, I found another clue. Ethan had left his laptop open. I wasn't searching through it. I was looking for a document I needed for our insurance. Then an email notification appeared. The sender was a company called Laurent Holdings. The subject line said, "Final Agreement. Claire Bennett." I stared at the screen. My heart started pounding. I opened it. There was my name, my address, my date of birth, and a document transferring ownership of a large property into my name, a property I had never heard of. I read it again, then again. It wasn't a gift. It was part of a legal arrangement. The property belonged to Ethan's father, and there was an ongoing legal dispute involving the company. If the property remained under Ethan's father's name, it could potentially be seized. But if it were transferred to a newly married spouse who had no connection to the company, it would be much harder to trace. They were planning to use me as a shield. I sat there staring at the document. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't his wife in their plan. I was an asset, a name, a clean identity, a legal wall between them and their problems. Then I saw Sophie's name in another email. I opened it. Her message said, "You don't understand what your father is doing to both of us." Another message said, "He never intended to give you control of the company." Then, "He promised me the same thing years ago." I stopped. Years ago? I went through the conversation, and the truth became even more complicated. Sophie wasn't just another woman. She had been Ethan's girlfriend before me. They had been together for years. Ethan's father had never approved of her. He had told Ethan that she wasn't good enough for the family, but at the same time, he had promised Sophie that if she stayed loyal to Ethan and the company, she would eventually have a future with him. He had manipulated both of them. When Ethan finally resisted his father threatened to cut him off financially. That's when Ethan started dating me, a woman with no connection to the family business, a woman whose identity could be used to move assets, a woman he thought trusted him completely. Me. I felt sick, but there was still one question I couldn't answer. Why was Sophie still talking to Ethan? Why hadn't she exposed him? I decided to call her. I found her number in one of the messages. My hands were shaking when I dialed. She answered after several rings. "Hello?" I spoke in French. "Hello, Sophie." Silence. Then, "Who is this?" I said. "Claire?" She stopped breathing. Then she whispered, "You understand French?" "Yes." Another silence. Then she started crying, not laughing, not angry, crying. I asked, "Did you know why he married me?" She said, "Not at first. Tell me everything." And she did. Sophie told me that she and Ethan had been together for years. She believed they were going to get married, but Ethan's father wanted Ethan to marry someone who could help protect the family's financial interests. Sophie said she didn't know about me at first. When Ethan finally told her he was marrying me, she was devastated, but she stayed in contact with him because she still loved him. I asked, "Did he tell you he loved me?" She said, "He said he cared about you." I closed my eyes. That answer hurt more than I expected. I asked, "Does he love you?" She started crying again. "I don't know anymore." Then she said something I will never forget. "I think he loved me once, but I don't know what he loves now. Maybe he only loves what people can give him." That sentence stayed with me, because suddenly Sophie wasn't my enemy. She had been lied to, too. She had been holding on to a man who had already chosen deception over love. I asked her one last question. "Why are you telling me all this?" She answered, "Because I wish someone had warned me before I lost years of my life." I thanked her. Then I ended the call. That night I sat alone in the living room. I looked at our wedding photograph. We were smiling. I looked happy. Ethan looked happy. But now I wondered whether photographs could lie too. I finally decided it was time. I printed every document, the bank records, the emails, the business agreement, the property transfer, everything. Then I placed them on the dining table, the same table where Ethan had spoken French 5 days after our wedding. I waited. Around 7:30 I heard the front door open. Ethan walked in. "Hey, beautiful." I didn't answer. He looked at me. Then he noticed the papers. His smile disappeared. "What's this?" I said, "Sit down." He didn't move. "Claire, what's going on?" I looked at him. "Talk to me in French." His face went completely blank. "What?" "French." He stared at me. Then I said in fluent French, "Tell me why you married me." He didn't speak. His eyes filled with panic. "You understand?" I nodded. I understood everything. He sat down slowly. "Claire, don't lie to me." "I wasn't going to." "You already did." He looked at the papers. "How much do you know?" I said. "Enough." He covered his face. For the first time since I had known him, he looked completely lost. I asked, "Was I ever your wife?" He looked at me. "Yes." "No." He shook his head. "Claire, please. You married me because your father needed my identity. That's not the whole story." "Then tell me the whole story." He was silent. I waited. Finally, he admitted it. His father was involved in serious financial problems. The company had debts. There were legal disputes. His father had told Ethan that if he didn't cooperate, he would lose everything. Ethan was terrified. Then someone suggested moving certain assets through a spouse. He said he never planned for me to be permanently responsible. He said he intended to fix everything after the legal problems were over. I looked at him. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" He didn't answer. I asked again. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" He looked down. "No." I nodded. That was enough. Then I asked the question that hurt the most. "Did you ever love me?" He stared at the floor. "I cared about you." I felt tears in my eyes. "That's not what I asked." He couldn't answer, and his silence answered for him. I took off my wedding ring. I placed it on the table. He looked at it. "Please don't do this." I stood up. "You did this." "Claire, I made a mistake." "No." I looked directly at him. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something cruel during an argument. You built a plan around my identity and married me without telling me why. I was scared. You were scared, so you used me. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did." I picked up my coat. He stood. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere you can't use me." And I walked out. The divorce process was difficult. There were lawyers, documents, investigations, questions. I had to explain how my information had been used. I had to prove that I hadn't knowingly participated in the business arrangement. I had to protect my credit, my finances, my future. But I had kept copies of everything, and because I had waited before confronting Ethan, I had evidence. The property transfer was stopped, the bank accounts were investigated, my identity was cleared, and eventually Ethan's father's business came under serious scrutiny. Other employees came forward. More financial irregularities were discovered. The company had been hiding problems for years. Ethan's father had pressured people into silence. He had manipulated contracts. He had used family members as tools. And suddenly, the story was much bigger than my marriage. Ethan eventually admitted his involvement. Sophie provided evidence too, and that was one of the strangest parts of the entire experience. Sophie and I became friends. Not immediately, not magically. There was too much pain between us, but over time, we realized something. Neither of us had really known the full truth. She thought Ethan would eventually leave me. I thought Ethan loved me. Both of us had been living inside different versions of the same lie. We met for coffee one afternoon. She looked at me. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know." She asked, "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No." "Why?" "Because I finally understand that you were lied to too." She started crying. I reached across the table, and for the first time, I held the hand of the woman I had once thought was my enemy. We didn't become best friends, but we became something else. Two women who survived the same deception. A year later, I moved to New York. I started working with a nonprofit that helped women dealing with financial abuse, identity fraud, and controlling relationships. I went back to studying French. This time, I didn't hide it. I became even better. Sometimes people ask me why I chose French. I tell them the truth. Because once, French was the language someone used to hide something from me. Now it's a language I use to remind myself that nobody gets to decide what I am capable of understanding. Ethan eventually sent me a letter. He apologized. He admitted that he had treated me like a solution instead of a person. He said he wished he could go back. I read the letter once, then I folded it. I didn't reply, not because I hated him, but because I had already said everything that needed to be said. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to destroy him. I didn't need to make his life miserable. I just needed to make sure he could never control mine again. And that was the moment I understood what karma really means. Karma isn't always watching someone lose their house. It isn't always watching someone cry. It isn't always about revenge. Sometimes karma is simply the truth arriving at the right time. Sometimes karma is someone losing access to the person they thought they could manipulate. And sometimes karma is watching that person build a beautiful life without you. That's what happened to me. I lost a husband, but I found myself. I lost the future I thought I wanted, but I gained the freedom to build a future I actually deserved. I lost someone I loved, but I stopped losing myself. And if I could go back to that night, sitting at the dining table while Ethan spoke French to another woman, I wouldn't change one thing. Because that painful moment saved me. It showed me the truth before I had children with him, before I bought a house with him, before I mixed more finances with his family, before I spent 10 years believing a man who never gave me the truth. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the day your life changes direction. I used to think that love meant trusting someone completely. Now I know better. Love should include trust, but trust should never require you to ignore reality. You can love someone and still ask questions. You can trust someone and still protect yourself. And you can forgive someone without giving them another chance to hurt you. I didn't choose revenge. I chose the truth. I chose my dignity. I chose my future. And honestly, that was enough. I still have the notebook from that night. The first page contains the French sentences Ethan said. The last line says, "I will not confront him until I know the whole truth." Sometimes I read that sentence and think about the woman who wrote it. She was 28. She was newly married. She was terrified. She didn't know what was coming, but she was brave enough not to react blindly. She waited. She listened. She found the truth. And then she chose herself. I'm proud of her. So if you're listening to my story and you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to remember something. You are not stupid because you trusted someone. You are not weak because you loved someone. And you are not foolish because you believed the person you married. The shame belongs to the person who abused that trust, not you. And if someone ever makes you feel like you're too emotional, too suspicious, or too naive simply because you're asking reasonable questions, don't ignore yourself. Your instincts deserve to be heard. If I had ignored mine that night, my life could have been completely different. 5 days after my wedding, my husband thought he was speaking French because he believed I couldn't understand him. He thought his secret was safe. He thought I was sitting across from him completely unaware. But I understood every word. And sometimes, understanding the truth is the beginning of saving yourself. So now I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, sitting across from your husband, 5 days after your wedding while he secretly spoke French to another woman, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him immediately? Would you have stayed quiet and investigated first? Or would you have walked away the moment you discovered the truth? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if Claire's story touched your heart, leave her a supportive comment, because sometimes a woman doesn't need someone else to fight her battles. Sometimes she simply needs the courage to choose herself. And if you stayed with me until the very end, thank you. I would also love to know one more thing. Which country are you watching this video from? Whether you're watching from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, India, Bangladesh, or somewhere else in the world, don't forget to tell me your country in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about love, betrayal, hidden truths, family secrets, and unexpected karma, subscribe to Emma Tells All and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the person you lose is not your greatest loss. Sometimes losing them is how you finally find yourself.